Hi everyone, I'm here today with Darren Thomson, Field Chief Technology Officer at Commvault. So we will be discussing some cybersecurity trends. And hi Darren and everyone, thank you for joining me.
No problem. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so can you share a bit about your experience and journey in the cybersecurity field and how did your career start?
Gosh, yes. So I'm quite old. So that goes back a way. So I'm 30 plus years in the IT industry now. Most of that, I would say 90% of that in the software field in particular. And certainly for the last 20 years, I've been involved in various forms in the business of managing digital risk. So in some instances, that was around things like disaster recovery strategy and architecture, high availability design, mitigating for availability risks. But I also spent a good part of my career at Symantec, who obviously are and certainly used to be a leading security vendor. And so there I was exposed very heavily and immersed in cybersecurity in particular as a digital risk. So and across that time, I've mainly been in technical functions, technical responsibilities. So I've managed engineering teams, I've managed consulting groups, I've led teams of field engineers, I've been a strategist, a field CTO. And I do serve on several boards right now outside of Commvault as a fractional CISO as well. So, lending my time to a charity and a couple of other organisations as they move through their security journey. I also, and this will probably come up in our conversation, Anna, I also spent a bit of time in cyber insurance, which is a really interesting field and maybe something we can get into here.
So you have quite extensive experience. And what are some of the key trends you're observing in the current cybersecurity landscape?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, outside of the normal trends of new risk types or new threat types, I'm seeing a number of what I'm referring to as mega trends that aren't necessarily specifically security trends, but they are IT trends that are hugely affecting security and the cybersecurity landscape. And so those six very quickly are: number one, cloud computing. So the move to cloud is having a really profound effect on the way we think about security, in particular data security and data privacy. So that would be the first one. The second would be around, no prizes for guessing, AI, AI and machine learning. We hear this everywhere right now, but it really is, again, having a profound impact in the way that criminals are going about their business and therefore the way that we have to defend ourselves as well. Number three would be software supply chain. So the fact that we're now adopting quite complex chains of supply via software typically is a huge opportunity for the attacker. We saw the SolarWinds attack as a great example of this manifesting itself a couple of years ago. So software supply chain is massive. Social networking would be another one. So anybody that knows anything about cybersecurity, or for that matter, any other crime, would know that social engineering is a massive part of criminality and criminology. No different in cyber, and the social networks are a dream come true, really, for the social engineer. So that's enormous. IoT is another one, right? So this concept of having unintelligent devices performing activities for us at the edge of our IT environments, and the accessibility sometimes through those to the cyber professional is really, really important. And then number six would be remote working. So obviously fueled by the pandemic, I don't think anybody expects us to return to zero in terms of the way we used to work. Most of us are ending up in some kind of hybrid scenario, but that hybrid working model is a challenge, for traditional cybersecurity strategy and concept. So that's the six of the mega trends. So those are the things that I'm thinking about in terms of massive impact to security.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you mentioned AI and machine learning. How exactly do you anticipate cyber attacks evolving in the near future regarding using AI and machine learning?
Yeah, so I think it's important to realise that there are some emerging new threats that we're going to see that could only have been possible through the application of machine learning and AI. So examples of those would be, for example, deepfake. The ability to create photorealistic video of something that doesn't really exist. That wouldn't have been possible without AI, and I fully expect, particularly in the area again of social engineering and potential social impact, I think deepfake is something that we're going to see more of, and it's going to have more impact. Another example would be phishing, which is essentially voice phishing, so the ability now to simulate voice in a very realistic manner, and frankly with less and less analysis needed of the original voice to replicate that voice. That's another example of a new threat. But I think perhaps more importantly in the short term, what AI and machine learning are doing to the attack landscape, to the threat landscape, is they are in a way kind of supercharging the things that we already know. So if we take a threat type like ransomware, for example, ransomware is not going anywhere. It's here to stay, and it's being, in many cases, and will continue to be supercharged by AI and machine learning. And by supercharged, I mean, AI and machine learning can often do a couple of things. It can allow us to scale further, so in other words, attack more people. It can enable us to be much more targeted because we can apply machine learning algorithms to a set of criteria that allow us to select targets. That would have been a very manual process in the past. Now it's an automated process, and it also allows us to kind of obfuscate the things that we're doing. So we can use AI, for example, to mask the reality of an action that's taken. So those are examples of how we don't change the threat type as such. It's still ransomware or data exfiltration or destruction or whatever it might be. It's just being supercharged by machine learning and AI.
Mm-hmm. And on the other side, could we use an AI-driven approach in cybersecurity in defending against the attackers?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say we're entering a new realm now of cyber. Let's call it cyber war or cyber adversary. And so the benefits that I just described of AI around the ability for machines to learn through ML, the ability to apply criteria to the things that we want to do, the ability to essentially supercharge our methods, that's just as applicable on the defender side of the equation as it is on the attacker side of the equation. And so here at Commvault, for example, we've actually adopted machine learning for many years now, probably a decade at least, and we're using it inside our data protection technologies to, for example, detect data anomalies, which is very important in the context of resilience, because if you can see that data that hasn't changed in a certain way is now changing, and you can automate the process of detecting that, and you can rely on huge data sets for that detection, that's a massive leg up, if you like, a massive advantage to getting to these attacks very early and detecting changes to our data a long time before the criminal is properly able to act. One of the things that we're really focused on with AI here is, I don't know, you've probably seen this statistic before, but it's not untypical for criminals to be on a network for way over 200 days before anybody in the organization that's being attacked is even aware of that. We call that dwell time. So the reduction of that dwell time is a key initiative. If we can minimize the amount of time that the criminal's on our network, then necessarily we're going to minimize the damage that they can do. And AI plays a major part in the way that Commvault are addressing that particular problem.
Mm-hmm. So the predicted cost of cyber attacks on the global economy is staggering. Is there a need for a new approach to cybersecurity, and what would it be?
Yeah, we certainly think so. And I think our view at Commvault is that we need to expand the conversation from security to a conversation about resilience. So you're right, the effect on global economy is staggering and getting worse. There are some factors that kind of contribute to that, including digitization across all sectors. There's almost not a business that you can speak to now that isn't digitizing in some way and adopting IT, in order to further their business. So that's massive. We mentioned cloud adoption earlier. That's a huge driver here as well, because criminals are taking advantage of massive cloud adoption, and so that's having an effect on how that looks globally. We believe that to an extent now, unfortunately, the breach is inevitable. I think organizations that believe that they can, not be breached at any point in their future history are frankly deluding themselves. It's very likely that everybody will be breached at some point. And, the traditional premise of security is to stop the breach, is to in some way, predict, and protect and be proactive about stopping the breach happening. Whilst I think we still need to focus on those disciplines, it'd be a good idea to stop the breach wherever we possibly can. That's good, but we also need to focus very heavily now on resilience. So what is our business's ability to recover from the breach, to be resilient to the breach, to, as much as possible, continue to operate with minimal business impact or impact on customers despite the breach. So we call that cyber resilience, and that's really the focus of our organization. We've recently announced a bunch of new technologies and investments and innovations and approaches that really focus on in part that recovery process, and what is the ability, should a breach happen, to recover to a state where the business can operate as quickly as possible. I mentioned the 200-day thing. The other statistic that's interesting, I think, is on average, for example, after a ransomware attack, on average, it takes well over 20 days for a business to recover from that ransomware attack. That's a month in business terms. That's a long time. So again, I think an industry imperative is to reduce that recovery time as much as possible. And there are a number of things that we can do to help with that. We can provide customers the ability to put a recovery plan together in the first place. We can also provide organizations the ability to test those plans so that when the worst happens, they know that they have a tested recovery plan. Everybody has their duties, everybody knows the playbook, and they can recover from a breach as quickly as possible back to clean data that is as new as possible. And so that's essentially the focus that Commvault have with regards to that. So going back to the global economy and how we perhaps start to turn the ship on some of these huge numbers that we're seeing, I think we've got to focus less on pure play security, preventing the attack, and we've got to kind of be more comprehensive about our approaches there, and at least spend some of our time and our effort and our money on our ability to recover.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned resilience against attacks. What are some of the best practices organizations can implement to enhance this resilience, regardless of their industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a few really. So I think number one is getting to the potential attack as early as possible. So it shouldn't be true that the indicator of compromise for a cyber attack is that all of our screens have gone blank and we're suffering from ransomware. That we should, a long time before that, we should have the ability to know that something is wrong. Our data is being manipulated in some way, and that may or may not be a ransomware attack, for example, but we should at least investigate. So I think a huge area of best practice being developed right now is how do we get to that early detection? I call that an early warning system. And that has a lot to do with being close to the data. So at Commvault, we've been managing people's data for many, many years now. We look at data in a very granular, high fidelity way. And so we're able to detect changes to data, things like, are files that have never been encrypted before starting to be encrypted, or, is there entropy that we've never seen before in data sets? These are things that we can use to trigger an alert and then work with our security partners to investigate, okay, was this a ransomware attack or something else? So that would be number one, is like a focus on early warning systems and early detection. The other one I mentioned already, which would be around recovery testing and recovery planning. In my experience in the cyber insurance industry, I investigated hundreds of cyber breaches, and in none of those cases did I see a comprehensive plan or a comprehensive testing regime whereby that company would isolate its critical assets to say, if we were breached in some way, This is the plan we're going to follow in order to get our minimal viable business up and running again. So the ability to write that plan, embed that plan in the organization's culture and best practices, and then very, very importantly, test that plan is an area of best practice that people should definitely be focused on, so that when the worst happens, everybody knows what needs to happen. There is a playbook in place. We have technology and architecture in place in order to facilitate it, and so the impact is much less.
Mm-hmm. So regarding that, like, how critical is employee training and awareness? It seems quite a bit. And how can organizations educate their workforce effectively?
Yeah, I think this is a really important topic that has been discussed now for decades. I think first of all, in answer to your question, I think training, awareness, and education around cybersecurity is paramount. You almost can't overstate the importance of that particular topic. Has the industry always done the best job at training people? I would argue not. So I think too often I see organizations who are using this very kind of prescriptive, go to this course, watch this video, answer a couple of questions, move on, tick the box type of concept. Does that have some effect? Probably. I don't think it's massively effective. I'm a really big advocate, for example, of sort of simulation and immersive experiences. So I'm definitely in favor of things more along the lines of tabletop exercises. So simulating a breach and forcing people to go through the motions of what they would experience should a real breach occur. Simulating real attacks so that our users, for as far as they're concerned, are actually being attacked, and then training them on the proper response to those attacks based on a real world event, based on a simulation perhaps. And so I think that immersive approach, that kind of using simulations, needs to take a much bigger role really in how we educate our users.
And so also regarding regulations, what are your thoughts on the upcoming DORA regulation and its implications for data security and privacy?
Yeah, so obviously DORA obviously targeting financial services. The basic tenets of the framework. I mean, from off the top of my head here, DORA is largely about a number of things. It's about, first of all, evidencing that there is digital resilience in place in business operations. Well, that is just talking to exactly what I said earlier, right? So DORA doesn't mention security as it mentions resilience. So what is the operational resilience that an organization can demonstrate so that in the face of a cyber breach, for example, it can withstand that? So that's number one in DORA. Very, very important. Two is sort of understanding the potential impact of disruption. So what is our preferred risk posture? Do we know what a minimal viable business system looks like? What could be the impact of various threats and vulnerabilities that emerge? So that's number two. Setting out clear objectives for a security program. All too often I see security managed as a series of projects. So we're going to do a project over here to mitigate that risk and a project over here to mitigate another risk. Security and resilience should be a program of work, a continuous improvement program. It never ends. It spawns projects, it spawns things that we have to do to make us more resilient, but it's essentially a program. And so DORA definitely promotes that as a concept. It also sort of ensures comprehensive mechanisms are in place to ensure effective risk management. So taking a risk-based approach to cybersecurity. So there are lots of tenets in DORA that I think are incredibly positive, and in particular, as it relates to Commvault's strategy, its focus on resilience as opposed to security is absolutely key.
Okay. Thank you so much. Okay, maybe as a final question, what advice would you give to organizations seeking to improve their attack prevention strategies?
Well, first of all, I'm gonna sort of pull you up on attack prevention because I don't think that's the answer, right? We've tried to prevent attacks for 20 years. And I work with organizations that have layers and layers and layers of tools and have adopted AI and all kinds of things and spent millions and millions of dollars, and they're still unable to prevent a breach, right? So Should we try to prevent the breach? Absolutely. But I think we need to be more comprehensive in our approach. If you think about the NIST framework, we need to be ready, and we need to have the ability to also respond and recover should a breach occur. So my advice would be think more comprehensively. Take the focus, 100% focus on just prevention and broaden that out to make sure that should the worst happen, the business is resilient, the business is able to recover should the worst occur.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna.